If you've ever looked into low heart rate training, you've probably found yourself in a sea of conflicting advice. What we need is a foolproof guide to follow. So in this video, let's try and make that happen. What if I told you that while it's easy to overcomplicate, the core essence of low heart rate training is pretty straightforward, and the big secret to making it work is pretty much hiding in plain sight? Intrigued? I know I was, and what I found really changed the way I trained forever. Let's dive in, shall we? Okay, so the best place to start is probably to look at the different heart rate zones and understand that they're not just arbitrary numbers. Following the crowd and using rough estimates based on this formula or that will get some runners into the right ballpark with their zones, but honestly, more by luck than judgment. As with most things, personalizing your training to your body is vital if you really want to get the most from low heart rate training. Just seemingly to make life difficult, there are lots of various models you could use when it comes to describing and setting heart rate training zones. So let's use a tried and tested 5-zone model. Each zone serves a specific purpose. These zones are described in terms of their percentage of max intensity. In a moment, we'll use a simple formula to add specific heart rate figures to these zones. Let's look at the zones themselves first. Zone 1, this is 50 to 60% of max effort. This is your warm-up and recovery zone. Think of it as gently prepping your heart and body for what's to come. Zone 2, 60 to 70%. This is where endurance athletes live. You're building mitochondria at this intensity, improving overall stamina, and you can sustain the pace for a very long time. Dr. Peter Attia talks about Zone 2 as being an intensity where you're able to hold a back and forth conversation on the phone, but where the other person knows that you're exercising. Zone 3 is 70 to 80% of your max. Aerobic endurance is the focus here. You're working harder, but not too hard. It's a comfortable challenge. Zone 4, 80 to 90%. Welcome to anaerobic territory. You're pushing your limits, building power and speed. It's intense, but it's worth it. And in Zone 5, which is 90 to 100%, that really is quality speed training at its best. Short bursts of maximum effort to push your boundaries. Understanding these zones is like having a roadmap for the different intensities that your body will be training at. But how do you calculate the zones? Well, let's have a look. Calculating your heart rate zones is actually a lot more simple than you might think. So bear with me. You'll need to know 2 specific figures though. Number 1, your maximum heart rate, and number 2, your resting heart rate. Most running watches will be able to tell you your resting heart rate if you wear the watch throughout the day. Alternatively, you can simply measure your heart rate after sitting still and relaxing for 10 to 20 minutes. Your maximum heart rate takes a little more work to measure. You can either get yourself tested at an exercise physiologist lab, or more likely test yourself with one of various different tests. Truth be told, you won't be far off if you take a look at your peak heart rate in a hard 5K race. With those 2 figures, you can easily determine your heart rate reserve by subtracting your resting heart rate from your maximum heart rate. Heart rate reserve, or HRR, is simply the range you have available for your heart to ramp up between its resting state and maximum effort during exercise. With that personalized heart rate reserve figure, we can be far more accurate when it comes to setting your heart rate zones. The simple formula we need to use is called the Karvanen formula and states that your target heart rate for a specific intensity is your resting heart rate plus your heart rate reserve multiplied by that intensity. So if a hypothetical runner's maximum heart rate is 186 beats per minute and their resting heart rate is 55 beats per minute, and you want to figure out what Zone 2 should look like for them, the formula for the bottom end of Zone 2 range would look like 55 plus 0.6 for the 60% times 186 minus 55. And the top end of that range would look like 55 plus 0.7 for 70% times 186 minus 55, giving us a result of 147 beats per minute. So we can say that to train in Zone 2 and get all of the aerobic base building benefits that come with it, our hypothetical runner would need to keep their heart rate between 134 and 146 beats per minute. Work through this process for yourself and you can tailor your own training plan. Honestly, small deviations in zone ranges tend not to significantly impact training outcomes too much in most runners, so don't sweat the minor details. It's all about being consistently in the right ballpark. You may well find that to begin with, running with your heart rate well and truly in zone 2 will involve you running at an incredibly slow pace. That's normal and part of the process. In fact, one of the key indicators of success is when after 6, 12, 18 weeks, you see your pace get quicker at the same heart rate as before, or lower. That's when you know you're making good progress. Now, let's talk about training plans specifically. It's one thing to know your correct heart rate training zones, but making sure you're training in them at the right amount each week is a different matter altogether. We're all coming at this from different start points, so it's hard for me to put a mileage or duration goal out there. But for best results from your low heart rate training, you should be looking to hit roughly an 80-20 split in terms of training load between running in zone 2, training your aerobic system, and quality speed work in zones 4 and 5. To keep it simple, hitting that 80-20 ratio and following the old adage of keeping your easy runs easy and your hard runs hard will see you making good progress. You just don't want to find yourself anywhere in that middle ground. I mentioned the training load metric there. I find this a better way to monitor the 80-20 ratio compared to time or distance or even number of runs per week. The easy way to calculate training load is to multiply your time spent running in minutes with the intensity of the workout. So for example, if you're running for 60 minutes at 70% intensity, that'll be 60 times 0.7, so a training load figure of 42. The higher your training load, the more stress you're putting on your body. Okay, so you know your training zones and you've planned your training and you're pretty much ready to go. But wait, how do you actually apply these insights to your daily runs? What's the real secret behind turning these theories into action? And how can it truly revolutionize your training? Stick around, because we're about to dive into those practical tips and tricks that will bring this whole thing to life. In fact, let's just get straight into it. The key to unlocking your full potential when it comes to low heart rate training is probably not what you think. These are the 3 steps we've put into place so far. Knowing your zones, so using the method we discussed earlier to find your heart rate training zones, writing them down and keeping them handy. Retest every 6 months or so. Create a plan, so design a weekly training schedule that gives you roughly an 80-20 split of easy and hard running at a weekly mileage that you can handle. And then monitor and adjust, track your progress, and don't be afraid to tweak as you go. But here's the big secret. It's not just about the numbers. It's about listening to your body. In fact, runners who do really well with low heart rate training, ironically, learn over time to rely less and less on heart rate as a metric. I usually encourage runners not to obsess over the numbers, checking their watch every 20 seconds or so on a run, but instead to practice getting familiar with the feeling of what it is to run at zone 2 versus zone 3, for example. When you can get to a point through rate of perceived exertion and breathing rate, where you can reliably get yourself into zone 2 territory and stay there without needing to constantly check your watch, your confidence in your ability to pace yourself will soar and your enjoyment will skyrocket. It's simple, it's tried and tested, and it has the power to change your running forever. You might be thinking, okay, I've got all the tools I need now, I understand my heart rate zones and how to train in them. What could possibly go wrong? But this is where so many of us stumble. It's the internal and external factors that can change your heart rate unexpectedly. The big twist here is that your heart rate is not only about your physical activity. Various external and internal factors can dramatically affect it. Think about it. When you eat, how you sleep, stress levels, temperature, altitude, even the time of day can change your heart rate. Your diet. So heavy meals can slow you down and a balanced meal can fuel you just right. Sleep. Well, a lack of sleep can elevate your resting heart rate in itself. And illness does exactly the same. Stress can cause fluctuations in heart rate. Weather, extreme heat, humidity, or cold weather will affect your body's response to exercise. Altitude, the time of day, hydration, the list just goes on. This isn't just trivia, it's essential to appreciate how these different factors could play a role in your heart rate and consequently your training. By recognizing them and adjusting for them, for example, heat and humidity in the middle of the summer, you're not only working smarter, but you're avoiding the common pitfalls that could derail your training entirely. If you found this video helpful, please do consider subscribing to the channel and check out this video next. It'll help you to avoid probably the biggest mistake runners just like you and me make when it comes to low heart rate training. I'll see you over there.